Hi everybody, Matt Lawton here. This is the Astrological Winds channel. I'm going to take a look at the astrological weather report for January 10th through the 16th, and also just briefly go over generalizations of the year for 2022, which, I've definitely mentioned a lot in the last few weeks in different blogs, so I'm just going to summarize it and mention a couple other little things. And I'm going to show charts today, a couple different charts. The first one being right here with Mercury Retrograde coming this week. So I just wanted to show that chart with something to make a couple points. Anyway, I wanted to start the week by telling you that if you'll remember when we talked about the monthly for January last week, that one of the events occurring was that Eris right here is starting now this week to go direct. It had been retrograde like a lot of the other planets, and it's still in the square with Pluto. You can see Pluto's at 26 Cap, Eris at 23 Aries, so obviously still within the orb of that, and so it's going to move forward now. And we know, been talking about Eris a lot. It seems like it does have a strong effect on the events of the world now that or the energy that the events of the world are responding to. Now that we're aware of this body out beyond Pluto that moves very slowly and represents the goddess of chaos and therefore change in our lives. So what's going on this week? As you can see here, the sun is going to conjunct Pluto this week, and therefore is squaring Eris, which is just stationed direct. So I really think, we're gonna, the Sun-Pluto conjunction is not until the weekend. It's on Sunday when it's exact. Eris goes direct today, that is Monday, but basically all week I think we're gonna really be affected by this energy. And I think we can expect to see an increase in events that we would define as chaotic in our lives and in society and the world, like just a lot of change going on, change that we have to accept that is inevitable, but it can feel like it's spinning out of control and has us in what would be like crisis mode because of the square, and therefore like having to do something about it, so but when you bring in the Pluto part too, it's going to have a really deep effect on our lives, and our journeys and in the way we look at things. So it will be a week of like deep experiences really, and emotions that come out from below the surface and have us dealing with subconscious energies that are coming into the light, and so you can move a lot of energy in your world, especially in places where you're in some kind of position of power or influence, and you could get some very strong results from pushing in those places where you have power and influence, but also some very strong reactions. You're not going to necessarily have everyone agreeing with where you're coming from, but like some very, very intense energy that comes up, and everybody finds themselves somewhere in a position of power. So it's a time when you can really really move things in places where you have that power. But it can be issues surrounding birth and death and rebirth, and like I said, power and fear, both in our personal worlds and in the world in general. But it's, basically showing us once again, this is a time of change, a time of being reborn, a time of being, regenerated, our lives being regenerated and taking big steps forward in our growth, in our personal growth, and in our evolution, and and in our everything really, in our politics, and the way we look at things, many things in our lives and in the world are in a state of decay. That's part of the natural process of things. And this is a week where we're going to really see what is in a state of decay, what is in a state of disrepair. And it's a week where we're going to be able to figure out, or at least maybe try to figure out, what of those things need to be discarded, what of those things actually are worthy of repairs. And don't think just objects here, think of situations. In fact, many times it has more to do with situations than it has to do with objects. But it can have to do with objects too, things that, maybe, have been in a state of like disrepair and decay for a long time, that are objects in your life may, give their last breaths this week. So it's, the big danger here is getting a little too, seriously chaotic with power struggles with other people, with authorities, even with the situations that we find ourselves in. It's gonna really feel like a struggle going on, and a need, and we have to understand that when Pluto is involved and when Eris is involved, that part of that power struggle can really turn physical, and that the proclivity for violent acts, violent reactions, violent feelings, from ourselves towards others and from others towards us, are at a higher degree of chance. So it's good to be aware of the people and places we put ourselves in, and to be aware of the inner feelings that we're going through, and try not to get it to a point of physical violent reaction to things like that. But it's things that can happen on a larger scale too, with groups or events, things like that. Now, interestingly enough, Mars is also trining Eris this week, and so you would think we might get some, there may be some smooth, harmonious ways to react to this. Now remember, as I said, change is hard. That's what Eris is all about. That's why it's chaos. But, also chaos theory says that's how systems evolutionize. That's how systems grow. That's how they become the next creative thing. So we need to have the change introduced into our lives in order for us to move forward and to grow. So maybe this Mars trine Eris will help us to take the proper actions to do so. But the Sun Pluto conjunction is going to give us a lot of deep looks inside on the energy that's driving us. Now also this week, we have a couple things earlier in the week going on with Neptune. And the one is today, Monday, where the Sun sextile Neptune on Monday. And then on Tuesday, Mars squares Neptune. Now, first of all, Neptune is, a dissipator of energy, a dissipator of, physical energy. When the sun is sextile Neptune alone, it's just kind of sweet. And Monday should be a kind of mellower day because the sun sextile Neptune. Not only that, Venus is semi-squared Jupiter that day, and also the moon went into Taurus and sextiled Jupiter too. So we have the triple take it easy on a Monday thing. But the sun sextile Neptune just gets us into a spiritually understanding zone, is a good way to say it. We're sensitive to ourselves, we're sensitive to others, we're sensitive to the environment, and we can have some really beautiful moments. It's kind of a romantic, abstract painting type of day, and can find much inspiration, that can fire up the imagination. Somehow our ideas usually are appealed to on that day. So, it's one of the days that, if you want to, because it is a sextile, and, and there is a lot of passive energy, there is opportunities to, create some kind of artistic output out of the inspiration you're getting, or, maybe take some kind of spiritual journey. But there's, it also puts us really in what, would be like the Dalai Lama frame of mind, the empathy and compassion for others and understanding. But then we get to Tuesday's Mars square Neptune, which is definitely already in orb on Monday and will continue into Wednesday strongly. So this guy is a completely different story. Mars and Neptune together, Mars is all about our energy, and, Neptune is the way of stealing this energy. So this could be a week where, once again, in current world situation, we have, the latest variant of the COVID and the flu and all these other things going around. And this is a signature. Mars Neptune is one of the biggest signatures of like illness that, is spread throughout, throughout all of society by like, some kind of like, germ or disease that's, contagious basically. So, and Mars is our bodies. So this is a week where we may really see a peak in our body's defense systems being lower than they normally are. And remember too, this is the winter, and that's a time too when the body, is already using a lot of its energy to keep warm and things like that when it's outside anyway. And so there's a lot, there's a lot of things that our body has to really, be in defense against this time of the year. And this shows that this is a week where the energy really slows down, and it can get to like a point of entropy. So really it's best for slow, deliberate, flowing kind of energy. And if you can do things like, some kind of, stretching, yoga, qigong, that would be a way of like honoring that energy, in many ways. But it's like, it's hard. It's going to be a difficult week to find the energy to function like you normally do. And so, and respond to situations like you normally do. So it's like, it can get to a point where some of the things that you feel like you're doing are almost pointless, and it can give you that feeling, of wanting to give up. But at the very least, it's showing us like weaknesses in our courses of action that we're on right now, and that we need to, like, that our ideals may be off, but, and if our ideals are off, and they're helping shape our reality, then we may end up figuring out that we've got ourselves in a bad spot. So for some of us, it might be, in some situations, it's a time where we need to cut our losses or bail out of certain situations. But at the very least, like I said, there's probably a lot of things that you're going to have to change your course on, because it's off a bit, and therefore your actions are off a bit. And and this is something the Sun Pluto can help us see too, this week, like where those actions are off, and then make those changes. And that's the struggle of the Eris, making changes. Now, one other thing I want to mention about Mars Neptune, traditionally that can also be a lot about deceit, about people who are not being straight up, so you need to be aware if you're in important negotiations, deals, agreements with people. This is an aspect of, deception, lies, withholding information, purposely diffusing information. So you want to be really clear about what you're doing in actions like that. It might not be the best week to hammer out agreements, is my point. Now, one other interesting thing on Monday too is the asteroid Vesta right here, and you can see it's at 1 degree by Thursday, went into Capricorn, joining the Sun and Venus and Juno and Pluto there. And, Vesta in Capricorn is, it's interesting because it can help us here with the Pluto Sun thing, about maybe helps us to find some methods that are orderly and structured, and, it, basically has our beliefs driving us in a serious way to get some kind of order or structure into our lives. So it's good for making and following out a plan. The biggest issue is, a lot of Capricorn stuff, it can get a little bit narrow-minded in what those plans can encompass, and really wants to stick with things that worked before, and really does not consider emotions a strong part of the input, that wants stuff to be more on the practical, disciplined, hard work, and proof of worth type of side of things. But like I said, that could also help us, find a mooring in a time of these changes. Now, the biggest thing going on this week, and I talked about it last week in the monthly, is that Mercury is going retrograde. And you can see here, this is the exact moment Mercury goes retrograde on Friday, 6:41 a.m. Eastern Time in the U.S., January 14th, and there he is, right at 10:20, stationing retrograde, and will be retrograde until February 3rd. So we've got about 20 days, as usual, where it will backtrack to 25 degrees Capricorn, approximately. It will go back into Capricorn on the 26th. And, I mentioned last week, I think this really is going to have a lot to do. We go inside with our minds during Mercury retro, and the communication slows down. It's more internal chewing over things. And I think what we're going to really do is really examine from the inside our own beliefs and values and how stuck we are on them, and that even though they may be forward thinking or different alternative, that somehow they're blocking us from being able to upgrade our systems right now, our lives, whatever it may be. So I think on an internal level, that's really what we're going to be examining during those 3 weeks, you know. And it goes back into Capricorn. It's the same thing, you know. Capricorn's all about structure, and old structure too. So I think that's really what the assignment is on a personal level for Mercury retrograde this time, is that, you know, how are your beliefs, how are you stuck with certain beliefs? And even if they're, you know, really cutting edge beliefs, they may be stopping you from your next step up in your growth, in your evolutionary process, in moving forward. So, like, you know, how is that happening is really kind of the internal assignment. Now, obviously, there's going to be all the delays and breakdowns and everything else that goes on during Mercury retro. And as always, I say, you know, don't start new things. Just continue doing the projects you're on. As far as travel goes, I would expect air travel will be the thing most affected during this. You know, I would expect, like, you know, the weather, cold and windy type weather that will stop, you know, delay a lot of things. And then there should be a lot of technological problems too, because Aquarius is the ruler of technology, and so we may have a lot of, a lot of the, internet down or whatever it may be. Now, one of the interesting things about this one too, and it's the reason I showed the chart here, when it goes retrograde, it's conjunct Saturn, and by the time it gets to going direct, it's going to be conjunct Pluto. So Mercury is in between Pluto and Saturn, and what we call that in astrology, when a planet is in between two other planets that are not considered positive planets, which Saturn and Pluto are not considered positive planets by energy, by tradition, that planet in between them is in a condition called besieged. It's surrounded basically by, so, Mercury's going to have a really tough time in this next 3 weeks of this retrograde. The conjunction to Saturn's going to be kind of feeling like where it sees so many restrictions that it can kind of almost get depressed, and get into a brooding kind of mind. But it does give the ability to discipline the mind too, and to focus the mind, and to really dial in on, like, trying to break through maybe some of these things that are blocking you. And Pluto is the same thing. It's really going to make us see where our shadow energy is coming up and pulling us down. And for people who might struggle with, like, things like depression and fearful energy, it can really, maybe show us the roots of things where that may be coming from. So it's going to be like, an intense internal journey, this Mercury retrograde. There's going to be a lot of things that each individual is going to have to think about, and then, like, roll up the. Now, the thing is, what do we want to do is use what we see with the Mercury Pluto and the things that were hidden to us from us before, the things that are driving us in our mind that we were unaware of before. We want to see them, and then with Mercury Saturn, discipline ourselves to start to change some of those things, because, like I said, I think this Mercury retro is going to show us where our beliefs are blocking us, even if they're more far-reaching than standard beliefs. So an interesting week for sure. I think it's a week like where we're going to be able to really look deep within and, really elicit some changes that can bring some personal growth in the future. Now, just a couple things I wanted to mention. And like I said, I have talked about 2022 already a lot. And, I've already told you guys multiple times that the Uranus square Saturn is still going to be going on. Here's Saturn here in Aquarius, and here's Uranus and Taurus. So you can see they're really tight still, 10 to 12. That square is going on all this year too, folks. So that was our year last year. I've said it over and over again. Structures falling apart rapidly, new things replacing them rapidly that are very chaotic, unstable. Many of them will not stick to the wall. A lot of changes going on. This is our main aspect of 2022 too, even though it's done being exact. By next fall, they're going to be within 1 degree of one another again. So just continuation of that energy is going to be the main energy of 2022's background energy. And just so historically too, when Uranus and Saturn get together, the revolutionary movements are usually conservative or what is called right-wing or nationalist. And you can see that is going on all over the world. So we can expect another year of that. And the other thing, in the past, there's been a lot of events that occur out of the Middle East during Uranus-Saturn. So I think the Middle East will continue to be a point of crisis and challenge for the whole world too this year. Just a couple things I wanted to mention too. There's not a lot of other huge things going on this year, but the 2 eclipse seasons are very interesting. One of them is in April, and during that one, the 2 eclipses, it's going to be the second Mercury retro and Pluto going retro. So that can be, an interesting, confusing time. There may be a lot of confusion in the springtime, in April and May, when that goes on. But even more so, the one October and November is a really, really interesting one, because this year Mars is going retrograde. And Mars is going retrograde right before the United States election, midterm elections. And there's already so much stress and strife in the United States. And so there's going to be 2 eclipses and Mars going retrograde right during the election season. So it may be a really crazy, wild ride again for the United States during the election season. And, I got the United States chart here, and that was the last thing I want to mention about 2022 without getting into it too deeply. U.S. chart is the inside chart, July 4th, 1776. I use the Sibley chart, Sagittarius rising. This year is U.S.'s Pluto return. You can see Pluto here is at 26, in the U.S., 27. For most countries that have made it to a Pluto return, which takes 248 years, the form of government changes. Something big changes the whole way the structure of the country is. Sometimes a country doesn't even survive as a country. So the U.S. is in for some really big changes this year. And then also notice Neptune is opposite Neptune at the same year. That shows confusion. Shows that people aren't really sure. Ideals have been lost. The ideals of what this country was formed for have been lost. The Pluto return has exposed that a lot of those ideals were not what they were truly taught to be. So now there's a lot of loss and confusion in the country. Pluto shows the dark underbelly of everything, and we know, we have a country that, there's a lot of racial tension in, that a lot of the wealth has been made in imbalanced ways, that a lot of the power that is in the country is imbalanced. That's all Pluto stuff. And it's been exposed now. It's been being exposed since Pluto started going through Capricorn now 15 years ago. And now it's catching right up to the U.S.'s Pluto, and that's why the United States is falling on the world stage, falling in their own citizens' eyes. The respect, the power of what the United States stood for is no longer there. And so this is a big change going on. And the Neptune opposite Neptune the same year is showing the confusion. And notice also, there's also Neptune, transiting Neptune is square Mars. Our Mars is in the 7th house. That is actually a dangerous energy signature of possibly war with an open enemy. And right now we have a lot of issues going on with Russia and Ukraine, and the U.S. saying they want to back that up. The U.S. and China have been saber rattling. So that is a very, very, we have to be really careful here. Neptune transits and mundane can bring war, especially involved with Mars. And Mars is in our 7th house of open allies and open enemies. So that is another thing that's, very, very, and then there's another thing I'd like to point out too. Chiron, transiting Chiron, is square the U.S.'s sun. The U.S.'s sun is the president. And Chiron is wounded. So this means, once again, just like the inauguration chart showed when the current president came in, that his life could be in danger. That his physical being could be in danger. So, and it's interesting too that transiting Chiron is also opposite Saturn. Once again, Saturn represents the executive branch. There's like wounding going on. And that, of course, can just be the distrust that people have in the president right now with very low ratings. But my point is, there's several other smaller transits that are not good ones either. The United States this year is likely in for some really big changes. And obviously, it's already gone through a lot of big changes in the last few years. So where it's all headed is interesting. It could be a new form of government. It really could be the beginning of a new form of government. Not saying that it could happen this year, but it's interesting that I even saw that the Center for Democracy last week said that the United States is a democracy that is actually not stable as a democracy anymore, and that our allies, Canada, or our neighbors, Canada, actually have already initiated a plan in case the United States no longer is a democracy within the next decade. And they feel that there's a really strong possibility of that. So with a Pluto return, that's a very, very strong possibility. Rome lasted over 800 years, the Roman Empire, and every time it had a Pluto return, the government changed completely. And Rome started as a democracy. Remember the golden days of Rome? Well, at its first Pluto return, the emperor declared it his, and it no longer was a democracy. It became like, an aristocracy. And then next Pluto return, the Roman Empire, got together with the Catholic Church, and it became the Holy Roman Empire. So that, I'm just trying to give some examples here of what, when a country goes through a Pluto return, it may recognize that the form of government that it's under or the way it's being done is going to change or has to change. So it's going to be an interesting year, and it's only the beginning for the United States in this. It's something that there's going to be a lot of strong changes over the whole decade for the United States and the world. In the 2020s. Anyway, this is Matt Lawton. This is the Astrological Winds channel. It is on YouTube. It is a free service. If you have a YouTube account, you can become a follower and just turn on your notifications if you want to know when it's actually there. There's really no reason to watch the video unless you want to see the charts or occasionally just watch me talking to the camera. So therefore, my point is it's on many podcasts too. And all you have to do is get on a podcast that you like and look up Astrological Winds channel, and you should be able to find it. And I know it's been going on more and more podcasts because I've been getting podcasts contacting me, asking me if I want to administrate it. So just look for it. Now, like I said, it's a free service, and if you want to give a donation, that's really cool, and you're welcome to. I'm on Venmo, PayPal, and Zelle under Matthew Lawton, Lauten. And but even better if you can pass it on to someone else who'd be interested in it. That would be the best thing for me. Otherwise, I do professional astrology readings. I've been doing them for 20 years. Very deep, very thorough, very moving. I do natal chart, which is your birth chart. It's the one I recommend first, and then you can get, if you're interested in getting a predictive reading, which is similar to the weather report I give each week here, except that I give you a weather report for your next year of your life. And then, of course, I do other stuff too, like relationship charts and children's charts and election charts if you're looking for a good timing to start a business or an event or a wedding or something. And then, horary charts if you have a question, specific questions too, relocation if you're looking to move somewhere else, what they call relocation, or astrocartography, fixed star readings for people who are looking deeper soul purpose type things. So all kinds of services available, and including classes, beginning classes too. All of that stuff, email me, mattHue823@gmail.com. That's mattHue823@gmail.com, and we can talk prices and all that kind of stuff. All right. Well, we know what the Saturn Uranus square brought us last year, so we know what it's going to continue to do this year. And as far as this week goes, it's going to be a really good chance to look deep within and then, start to make some adjustments to values and things that are holding us back, and recognize them first, and you know, kind of discipline ourselves to prepare ourselves to change them so that we can move forward. This is Matt Lawton. See you next week.